Good morning, afternoon, and evening, and welcome to the Climate Cafe Multi-Faith. Today, sharing conversation with us is Nivek Anderson Brown. Nivek and her husband run the Leaf and Bean Farm. It is a homesteading adventure. A number of years ago, she left urban life behind. Life as an urban professional, and they bought some land and an old farmhouse, and they have been sharing their journey on Instagram and TikTok about what it has really meant to them to start a farm, to start homesteading, to grow their own food, and to discover an abundant life. So if you haven't yet, check out Leaf and Bean Farm on Instagram and TikTok, but also she is sharing with us today, and I'm just so glad to hear about her journey, about the things she's learning, about the passion she has for this effort. And so, yes. So Nivek, I'm so glad you're here, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you for having me. It's afternoon for us here, so good afternoon. Just a little bit about myself. I am a wife, I am a mother, I am a grandmother. So a lot of the things that we put into practice was for the benefit of our children and our children's children. So for us being in corporate America, the rat race just started to become a little bit too much. So we had made the decision that we were going to purchase some rural land, and it was going to be our camping getaway. And we bought the land sight unseen, about 3 hours away from where we were living. Go to see the property, and on the property we find a whole home. There's a whole country house behind the trees and the grass and that type of thing. So now we're really excited because, we're going to have somewhere to go. My husband made the decision that this is something that we should pursue now instead of putting off, because the goal was we would take our time, we would do it over a couple of years, and then this would probably be where we retired. But coming back and forth, seeing the land, getting the layout, we just knew. We always say we were moved by spirit to make the leap in, because we didn't know how much longer we had. Unforeseen occurrences, anything could happen. So let's make this leap forward. That's what we decided to do. We packed up everything. We moved into a crumbling house around us into one room to remodel everything else around us while we were working. And the goal was to be self-sufficient. And at that time, we didn't even have a name for it, what we wanted to do. But of course, like so many other people in doing the research, I'm a reader. My husband is an avid reader, so we started getting books. Where we're from, we have a thing called a book exchange. So it's like a library on steroids. And so we go to the book exchange. We have like stacks and stacks of books on growing and building and homesteading and systems and all of these things that we're doing. And of course, we went to YouTube University as well for all this research on how we were going to put these things into place to benefit us. Being the fact that we had adult children, we didn't really have to worry about schooling and that type of thing. So we knew we could go kind of like full throttle in what we wanted to do. So this was about 6 years ago. We started with a container garden. We were just growing in little buckets on the things that we enjoyed. I encourage everyone out the gate to start with tomatoes, because that's what we started with. And it was such a success, and we weren't doing a whole bunch of different things, but we were growing tomatoes. And that was like so fulfilling to me that, we go out, we get fresh tomatoes for our salads, and we're making pasta sauce and that type of thing from scratch. I am very fortunate that I grew up with both sets of grandparents and a set of great grandparents. So I had always had this influence in my life of doing these things from scratch, because that's what they did. So we decided then that we were going to take on roles, not necessarily gender roles, but the things that we were strong in. And I was strong in inside, and my husband was strong outside. Okay. So he focused on building rain catchment, chicken coop, goat pens, all of those things. He focused on that. And I focused on canning and preserving, seed starting, bread making, that type of thing. And so in doing that, us being able to, okay, how do we do this? How do we do this cost effectively? Because we decided that we didn't want to go into debt. So we didn't take out any loans or any of those things to take on this project. We were going to do it as we could, a little bit at a time, that type of thing. So now we're juggling budget, we're juggling how we're going to fix the home, we're juggling how we're going to get the land together. Oh, and that first year, we knew we couldn't grow on the land because we had to clear. So we had like tree stumps and grass and all of that stuff in the way. So we couldn't go in ground. That's why we did the container gardening. This is one of those things where when you start one project in homesteading, it leads to another thing. So as soon as we decided we wanted the chickens, now all the research and the reading he had done on building a coop, now's your time to shine, sir. Get on out there and build us a coop. And so he took on the task of doing that with pallet wood. He was like, I'm going to build the most extravagant pallet wood chicken coop you've ever seen in your whole life. And I was definitely here for that because eggs, staple here. We knew we wanted to do that. Got the chicken coop done. We were so proud. We were so proud. Oh, he does not have a background in woodworking or anything like that. So it was trial and error. Everything, we were doing was we had never done before. We got our first chicken coop up. We got our flock going. And unfortunately, that fall, we lost that flock. And for me, I was like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to have animals anymore because I am very empathic to things like that. And even though I knew they were here for a purpose, losing them, I thought was like the end of the world. I was crying like it was one of the kids and that type of thing. So I was like, I don't want to do any more animals. Let's just, figure out the other part of it. We go into our next growing season, and now we are like experts. Not really, but this is what we felt. We felt we were experts. We felt we could do this. And we started with 11 raised garden beds because we still couldn't put in the ground yet. So we started with the raised garden beds. We got those going, and it was a success. We produced enough food to store for an entire winter. We were able to give food to our family members and some of our neighbors. So that was it for us. That was, we are hooked. Now we're making a plan on how we're going to expand this thing, how we're going to do more. By this point, I had started and killed at least 4 sourdough starters. I had made cheese that was not really cheese. We were burning breads. Our first greenhouse had blown over and been put up several times for us trying to figure this out. So it was a lot of growing and learning, and it just felt amazing. But in that growing and learning, when we were looking online and that type of thing, seeing people that looked like us doing this wasn't there at all. So in the homesteading family, I'll call it, you don't see a lot of people of color. And so then I wanted to know why that was, because I knew a lot of the traditions of the things that I was doing, I learned from my grandmother and her from her mother, and I knew they were doing gardens and stuff. So why wasn't there more people being represented that looked like me? Could not find any. And so we made up in our mind that we were going to show people what we were doing, rain or shine, or success, this is what it looks like. We found that a lot of people, when we asked them why they weren't doing this or why it bothered them, people fell into two categories. One category were people that were just like, I am in the city. There is no way I am giving up this life to go fight frogs and snakes the way you do. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And then in the other group, we had people that really have this relationship with the land. So African Americans have a history with land that has not always been positive. And so that being ingrained into us, then you still have people that are like, there's no way you could get me to work in a field because of what they felt like it still represented. So trying to make the connection for those people that had fear, that we're still having fun. And for those people that had the negative, that it was not negative and that we were living a life of abundance. And I shared this with Rashinda. This is my philosophy, is to show people that living this life is not a sacrifice. In the beginning, it was a sacrifice only because we had no idea what we were doing, but it was still fun. We still found joy and reward in it. So it wasn't like, oh my God, I'm missing out on this and I don't have this. And No, it moved us to want to do more, to be able to have the things that we enjoyed. That's another one of my talking points to people. If you're learning what you enjoy and you're taking responsibility for that, you can have all those things. I am a wine drinker. I learned how to make wine. It just made perfect sense to me. I love sweet things. So I have to bake. I have to make chocolate syrups and caramels and marshmallows and those type of things. So if you change your mindset on it being something, oh, I can't do that, then you would understand the benefit of it. Growing from that, here's another thing where you grow from the homesteading forward. Then it went into climate and how we could save the planet and how I want my grandbabies to be able to enjoy a planet. So what can we do here on the homestead that helps that? So our first step at that was composting, which totally made sense because it's going to benefit us to do this composting. It's going to, once it's done, we're going to put it right back into the garden. So it's usable. But then it grew to, okay, how many things can we build using materials that we're recycling? How many times can we use one thing to make it not waste? Another thing about living rurally is that we don't have trash service. So it's not like we get to wheel a trash can out to the road and that type of thing. You have to either pack it up in a truck and go down to a landfill, or they're burning trash. So now we're like, well, we can't do that often. So what waste can we get rid of? My first one, and this is the one that I stand on, and I mention this a lot in social media, is paper towels. I've never understood the use of paper towels. So I'm going to pay you to put it in the trash. I'm paying to make trash, and then I have to pay to deal with that trash. So we're going to cut out these paper towels. We're going to use reusable towels, that type of thing. And then it just snowballed. We're not buying any more plastic water bottles. We're going to use these glass water bottles. We're going to not use dishwashing liquid anymore. We're going to use soap nuts. And so little bit at a time, little bit at a time. And this is my approach when I talk to people. It doesn't have to be drastic. It doesn't have to be drastic. If you decide to take on one thing for sustainability for your family, it will make you think more. It will make you slow down on how you're using things. And that way it's a process and you're growing toward that. We don't talk about the amount of acreage we have here on land because we try not to discourage people. I never want people to think that, oh, well, she can say that because she's sitting on. 9, 10 acres of land. So then they can, they can do that and I can't do that. When I say you can start this if you're living in a car. And I mean that. And if you get a cup and a seed, you can start homesteading. We get this thing in our mind that homesteading, and social media, the TV shows you homesteaders that have acres and acres and pastures of cows and horses, and they have these fabulous farm homes. And if you've ever been to a working homestead, they all look like junkyards. And I love I love it, but a working homestead is not something that you want to see. Like, it doesn't draw people in. So that's another goal that I'm really focused on with my husband, on making it aesthetically pleasing as well, because a lot of people will say that. So our piles are very neat piles here. We have very neat piles, very organized piles of things where you're working from, because everything has a job here. So if it's a pile of wood over there, it's dual purpose. We're burning that for heat. He's using that to build. It's doing something. There's a pile of compost. There's a pile of wood chips. It's a lot going on, but it's functioning. And if anything were to happen to the system, and this is another thing that is my husband's push, if anything were happen to the system, like what happened with COVID, and I really did not want to seem insensitive to people, but for us during COVID, it was like we were in a bubble, and we did not experience it the same because we were already relying so much on ourselves. It just affected us differently. When there was a shortage of, bread at the grocery store and that type of thing, I was like, well, I haven't bought bread from the grocery store in quite a long time. So, we're okay. And we don't leave the homestead except for, to go to work and that type of thing. And at that point, I had gotten laid off. So I was like, well, I'm fine. I'm going to stay on the homestead and build and do all that. So it didn't affect me the same way. And I want everyone to have that kind of security where you feel confident that even if it's not long-term, that you have enough to provide for you and your family to the point where you're not faced with the fear of, I don't know what we're going to do. And so the small steps in what you're growing, what you're doing, growing things that your family enjoys, that was a lesson, a hard lesson that we learned. I think year four, I got really excited. My husband had put in 40-foot long raised beds. We had 4 of those, 40-foot long beds. So now I'm like, oh, I'm growing everything, like stuff I don't eat, I'm growing it because I got the space to grow it. And we were able to plant in ground. So I'm like, Kawano melons, rutabaga, a little mushroom patch, everything. And then when it grew successfully and no one was eating it and we weren't doing anything with it, and I got stuff going rotten and I'm throwing it to the chickens and the goats are turning their nose up at it, it just didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. So then I got reeled in, and the focus is, what is my family going to eat? What is my family going to enjoy? You don't have to grow everything that's on the market, and that helps your focus as well. So that is why we're pushing to do what we do. That's why we want people to see us out here doing it, encourage other people to homestead, that it is not just farming, it is every aspect. It's trying to take back security from every aspect. The systems, the food, being able to sow a lost art. And you don't have to necessarily design clothes, but do you know how to, sew a hole in your sock? Like if something happened and you couldn't get to the store and your big toe's poking out, can you sew enough stitches to get you a whole sock, especially, in the colder temperatures and that type of thing? Foraging. And foraging, we started on accident. And walking through the woods, because we have a large wooded area. I think I saw chamomile or something growing. And so I was like, oh my God, it grows on its own. You don't have to buy a seed. What is happening here? What is this? So that week, I remember we took, I don't know, about 3 or 4 trips. Every time my husband was available, I was like, come go with me. Because I was afraid to go in the woods by myself because we have bears and fox and that type of thing. So I was like, okay, I got to bring my backup, but I still want to get out here and see what's going on. And I found a app, Plant This app, and where you could take pictures and it would identify plants. We had been doing studying as part of our homestead journey for herbal remedies, herbal medicines, that type of thing, to also be able to take care of our family if something were to happen. But when I found the app and then I could just click on it, I was running. Back and forth through the woods, just, what's this? What does this do? Cut that, bring that down. I also learned that I should mark where I find things before I leave the woods. I lost a sassafras tree this year, and I'm still hurt feelings about not being able to find it because I didn't mark it. But that foraging thing really gave us a sense of independence, being able to find things that would help medicinally, being able to find things that we could eat if we didn't have seeds to grow. And then that grew into us making a land botanica for our piece of land. So we collected leaves and cuttings from as many plants as possible to label and put together in a book, because our responsibility as stewards of this land was that if we weren't here, if our children were here, our grandchildren were here, or anyone else was here, they could get a head start of what we learned. So we put all that, still growing. So we started putting all that stuff together to have here. And then the traditions of the recipes and those type of things that we're using, we're putting those together too. So we're just encouraging people to homestead. Simple ways, find one thing, take classes, learn something, bread making, wine making, sewing, a wood shop class, and showing that it's fun. That was very important to us too. A lot of our friends and family were like, we had lost our mind coming out here. They were just as like, we don't know what you all are going through. And so now when they come, they cannot believe what it actually is. And I think a lot of people, that is the way it is. They see things and they don't actually get to experience it. And that's our new project now, is experiencing the homestead, for people to come out and to actually see what it is, not just assuming it's you don't have running water or electricity. That always cracks me up. But to see, I believe in my heart that we live more abundantly than a lot of people. That we get to get up and look out of our window at a picturesque scene every morning. Our babies, our goats, and our chickens, and the cats. We run a menagerie here. There's so many different animals around, are like family. It is such a rewarding thing. And I don't think people really understand how rewarding it is, because we're bombarded with so much material things that's supposed to make you happy. That's supposed to make you happy to have these cars and these homes that you don't get to be in because you're working a 60-hour week, and the money is so small that you're barely making it. We're here in those same budgets. I say this all the time. In those same budgets, you could be living so richly if you were doing more for yourself. And I don't understand when we got to the point where we were willing to give up such good things for convenience. And that's all it boils down to. These things that people hold on so tightly to are for convenience. And when you take that away, people act like, oh my God, like the world is ending. But it's really not. And it makes you think, and it's more rewarding when it is you. When it's you, when you can say, I baked that loaf of bread. Do you see how good that loaf of bread is? You really appreciate those things more. And I would hope more people would do it. I have been able to convince a few people to do a little bit more. But again, it's a struggle, it's a battle, and I'm not going to walk away from it anytime soon. I feel like it's my calling, and it is my purpose to share it to whoever will listen and to encourage them to do that. And so that's what I do. I'm here with you all. Of course, I definitely try to push for people of color, for all the BIPOC to be part of this, because it's not very represented. There is always the land discrimination that often are faced by people of color in trying to do this. But there's still a way to do it. And there's still people out there that support and encourage. And so I'm going to be one of those. I'm going to be an advocate. I'm going to be looking. If I find information, if I find land, if I do that type of thing, I'm always available. And that's how it's been from the very beginning. And I think because I've been so open in what I've done and what we're doing, that those things are coming. Those things are coming to us, where people will have deals and that type of thing, and they'll come. Hey, do you know? Actually, there was a nonprofit that sought us out to find some homesteaders for rehoming their goats. And so they give away goats every year to homesteaders of color to help them start their goats. And that goes through us. And I was like, had I not put myself out there, we would have never known that. And they're doing Nubians and Nigerians. And if you know about goats, these are expensive goats. They're the bucklings go for like $400 or $500, and they're giving them away to encourage people. So I just want people to know that it is not about suffering. It is making a living abundantly, a responsible, abundant living. We are recycle, reuse, repurpose all day long. That is the goal, because we want people to not only be able to do it, but to be able to afford to do it. A lot of times that's the thing where they're like, oh, I just don't have the money to do it. But you do. But you do. You just have to prioritize a little differently. You have to prioritize a little differently. And it is not an immediate reward, but it comes quick enough for you to push through. So we just ask for people to, support those Black farmers that you see, support Black homesteaders that you see, not just Black, persons of color, Indigenous, Hispanic, those type of things, because we seem to be falling a little bit behind the race toward being sustainable and self-sufficient. And so that's who I am, and that's what I do.